Little remix version there of the intro. I liked it. You over there doing a little DJing?
I don't think so.
You scratching some records?
I think the internet was doing a little DJing.
All right, greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erz, and he's DJ Big A Aaron. All right. Hope you had a great weekend. Thank you for tuning in here with us today. Over the weekend, it was confirmed. We talked about this for about 20 minutes last week when I had heard that this thing was coming imminently. And then, sure enough, it came down the pike the very next day. And over the weekend, indictment number 2, we're going to start numbering these. All right, so Trump indictment 1 is the New York Bragg case in Manhattan. Trump indictment 2 is the DOJ case, which Trump indictment 2, I hope you have a scorecard. When I was a kid and used to go to the Tiger games at Old Tiger Stadium, I always kept score. I looked forward to that every summer, was keeping score as a little kid at Tiger Stadium.
I totally believe that.
And the way you said that didn't sound all that flattering. Don't worry, I brought my glove. I never caught anything. So I was the kid with the glove, and I kept score. All right? 3-6-9, or 3-6-4, whatever it was. Double play, that kind of stuff. I did all that. Anyway. So hopefully you're keeping score here because this
is a really weird double play, by the way.
That is a double play because first base is where it would end, and that's actually position 3. I know. But this is going to get weird too because indictment 2 is actually DOJ indictment 1.
I hate everything about how this week is starting.
I do too. I know. Happy Monday.
God.
All right, but hard to tell the Banana Republic without a scorecard. All right, I mean, you got to keep track of all this. All right, so Trump indictment 1, which is 34. Now, I'm the one that told you that you absolutely did commit a campaign finance violation by not reporting an in-kind reporting paying off a porn star. That would. I absolutely believe that's a campaign finance violation. That being said, it clearly isn't worthy of 34 felonies. Fair? It's a bit of an overreaction there by the district attorney in Manhattan. All right. Normally it would just be some kind of a fine or something of that nature and we all move on. Okay. But no, it's this era. So instead it's 34 felonies. 34 felonies that Trump has been charged with. That's indictment 1 in Manhattan. Indictment 2, which later this summer will likely end up becoming, even though it will still be indictment 2, it'll be DOJ indictment 1. Because DOJ indictment 2, which will be indictment 3, who's on first? That is coming from the DC Gulag on January 6th. Are you still with me? All right. So Trump indictment 2 came down on Friday, the paperwork and everything else. We are going to spend a good deal of time on the show after this opening segment, breaking this down and discussing it. Now, we are primarily going to discuss this politically because that's primarily what this is. This is a political persecution. That's primarily what it is. We will have some legal analysis. I'm going to tease this. I did consult with somebody who has argued numerous cases in federal court, whose opinion I hold in very high regard, and they would be a Trump fan without being a Trump fanboy. Why? Because some of the cases they've argued have actually been in opposition at times to policies that were being conducted by the Trump administration on various issues, or that they weren't willing to uphold. I mean, I don't want to give too much away because I promised this person in an era where you're not allowed really. Now I'm going to do my best, and maybe it'll end up being my last. I'm going to do my best to just refuse to not tell you things you don't want to hear if I think they are true. I'm going to do my best to do that. But we are in an era right now, like thoughts and prayers to Jonathan Turley's mentions. Jonathan Turley has spent a lot of the last 4 years being very defensive of Donald Trump on cable TV, particularly Fox News. Is it George Washington University? I think that's where he's from.
Yeah, I think so.
The legal scholar, right? Yeah. He even was a pro-Trump impeachment witness back a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, he was on TV yesterday saying that he thinks Trump is toast. All right, that he thinks he's cornered. So now suddenly, of course, Jonathan Turley, to a lot of people listening to shows like ours, is a cuck, traitor, and a moron. And a bunch of people who called him a traitor and a Trump simp and a Cheeto Jesus worshiper for the last few years when he was being very defensive of Trump on cable news, now suddenly think they have now suddenly have a newfound respect for him. I mean, this is the era where there's just not a lot of interest. When you're in the midst of a civil war, truth is kind of a lost commodity. I'm going to do my best to cling to it, though, on this show. So I thought to myself over the weekend, because I've not read a second of the indictment. I mean, you know how much I love Julie Kelly. I've not even read her breakdowns. Now, that's rare for me because you know that I sat down in January when we got the Fauci deposition, all 8 hours of it. I sat down in January and read every word, every page, and live tweeted it as I was reading it. I try to read as many of these things as possible. Why didn't I read this one? I don't know that I'll read any of them from this time forward because this is just a political proceeding now. For the most part, that's why when I heard he was going to get indicted, I actually went and looked at what's the makeup, how many people in Miami-Dade County voted for Trump. How many people in how many people in Manhattan voted for Trump? Because what is or isn't in there is, in my view, largely immaterial. But I do think there should be some legal analysis. And so I thought, who could I get that would not be a simp for the spirit of the age on any level, but has consistently fought them in court, would give Trump a fair shake, but has opposed Trump or his administration when they went too far on something or didn't go far enough. And I came up with that name over the weekend. I got a hold of this person yesterday afternoon. They said I'd be happy to do it and wrote back to me their review of the Trump indictment. I will share that with the audience a little bit later on. Okay. I'll give you a bit of a spoiler. They don't necessarily share Jonathan Turley's take on it, but they'll explain why. So we'll look at that. We'll look at this primarily from a political construct, though, for the majority of the show today, because it's an unprecedented, obvious attempt by a political office holder to try and use the legal system to take out someone that, perceptively anyway, is the leading candidate to be his challenger next year, after he was his literal challenger 3 years ago. So this is blessedly an unprecedented moment in American history. Now, a lot of other nations have lived through this kind of tumult and worse for their lifetimes. It's unique to us because we had a certain amount of divine favor we no longer have as a people. And so lots of things that we used to think were unique to us have not been, we have broken a lot of maidens, as they say in the sport of kings, horse racing, the last couple of years, have we not? Yeah, there has been a lot of unprecedenteds, have there not? And you know why? Because we don't have divine favor as a people anymore. We have turned our backs on God. And so now, we're not an exceptional country now. We're just a country with an exceptional amount of wealth, people, military, debt, decadence. We're exceptional in our attributes, for better or for worse, not in our character as a people any longer. And so there's a lot of unprecedenteds that you've already seen, and we're going to see more because of the era in which we now live.
I can't wait until the Lego Rainbow White House comes out, Steve.
Well, I'm sure that is something that will be highlighted right now by Aaron in his rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by bowing down before the graven image. This weekend at the White House, they had a so-called Pride Festival, and the Biden administration made the decision to position the so-called Progress Pride flag front and center and scoot the American flag to the sides atop the White House rotunda. Joe Biden, who has in the very recent past spoken to groups of military servicemen, addressed the rainbow-adorned crowd.
We all talk about courage. Well, I see more courage in this lawn than I've seen in any time in the recent past.
Biden also called the Rainbow Jihad the bravest and most inspiring people he's ever seen. Brave and inspiring are, I guess, the new terms of art to describe suffering and despair, like this woman who's pretended to be a man for the last 8 years, just now finding out that men and women are wired completely differently.
Nobody told me how lonely being a man is. I had closer friendships with random women I met in the bathroom before I transitioned at clubs because of how open women are than I've had in my 8 years of transitioning. Because women are just so much more vulnerable and deep and men.
That's a video that went viral over the past few days thanks to libs of TikTok. Moving on, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis were back on the campaign trail, with the former making stops in Georgia and North Carolina, and the latter showing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
At the end of the day, either the communists destroy America or we destroy the communists. And never forget what the demented persecution of our movement is all about. Our enemies are desperate to stop us because they know that we are the only ones who can stop them.
I have veterans coming up to me now saying, I don't want my kids or grandkids joining the military. And that's not the way it used to be. Usually people were proud to have this carry on in their family, but it's because they see the military's lost its way. And look how bad recruiting's been now in the military. People don't want to join a woke military. So on day one as commander-in-chief, we're ripping it all out by the roots, and we are going to restore the military to what it should be.
DeSantis garnered Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt's endorsement during his swing through the Sooner State as well. To absolutely no one's surprise, scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China were intentionally merging dangerous coronaviruses to create new mutant viruses just before the COVID-19 pandemic began. That's according to a new report. The Sunday Times published an eye-opening report that accuses China of engineering mutant coronaviruses for malicious purposes, including using the new virus as a bioweapon while developing a vaccine to protect their citizens. Left-wing billionaire George Soros has reportedly handed his societal hatchet to his 37-year-old son, Alex Soros. The Open Society Foundation, which pours money all across the country into left-wing activists and politicians, will now be headed up by the younger Soros, who has apparently a particular policy penchant for baby killing and trans. And now a couple of more encouraging items. We'll start with this story that's flown under the radar. Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama has been in the process of blocking over 200 military appointments that require congressional approval over the Pentagon's policy that allows female service members to travel to have their babies killed. This story has flown under the radar, and of course the Pentagon doesn't want to be seen as bargaining with the senator over this either. A new Gallup survey finds a larger majority of Americans now, 69%, than in even 2021, 62%, say athletes should only be allowed to compete on sports teams that conform with their sex. Even 7% more Democrats in the survey than in 2021 believe girls should compete with girls and boys with boys. And finally, this.
My pronouns are I, me, he, him, she, her, we, they, us. Sometimes I even use Shakespearean pronouns, which are thee, thou, thy, thyself, and ye. I'm transgender, non-binary, gender conforming, gender fluid, just to name a few. As you all know, the trans movement is the fastest growing movement out there, so I figured, why not get involved in the ground level and use it to my advantage? For instance, whenever I'm late to work, which happens a lot, I'm not gonna lie, I just self-identify as translate. Not translate like the language translate, but you guys know what I'm talking about. That's someone who's late but identifies as being on time. I thought of that one myself.
I'm not gonna lie, it is challenging having somebody like Ernie in the office, but due to diversity requirements, we have to have he, him, she, her, we, they.
Don't forget about us.
Sorry.
It's okay.
And us in the office.
After lunch, I identify as transabled. That's someone who identifies as being handicapped. I do this purely to get out of working a few hours of the day.
Ernie.
Huh?
Over here, Ernie.
Yes.
You know you're not blind, right?
I know, dude, but can you not? I don't want, shut up. I don't want them to know. Relax. Later in the day, I identify as transracial and become a black dude from Brooklyn. My name is Tyrone, but my boys call me Tyreezy. You feel me? Brooklyn, stand up. Sarah, want to do lunch? Shut up, white boy. I'm trying to shoot. Damn. Yo, if you step to me, dog, I have to pull the trigger. Don't let the baby face fool you. I'm a real ass nigga. What the f***? Where'd he go? I'm also transparent. That's identifying as not being present. I do this to get myself out of sticky situations.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Excellence, absolute excellence. Mock the spirit of the age. Mock those mock demonic ideologies that take themselves way too and ridiculously seriously. It's biblical. There are numerous biblical examples of it, and that is a practical example of it right there. Aaron's Montage brought to you by our friends over at Collective. I know a lot of you in our audience. You have a small business. You are a freelancer. You're entrepreneurial. You're a consultant, a software developer, photographer, content creator, graphic designer, any number of specialties, but you hate the crushing busy work that every solo entrepreneur has to deal with, from business formation, paperwork, accounting, bookkeeping, and taxes. That's why you want to focus on your passion, not your paperwork, and you have to know about our friends at Collective.com. Collective is the all-in-one financial solution for freelancers, contractors, and self-employed entrepreneurs, especially if you're making north of $60,000 in profit per year. It handles everything from corporate formation, compliance, paperwork, taxes, bookkeeping, accounting, even payroll. The perfect marriage of technology plus human tax and accounting experts there to guide you. If you've already made money this year but don't have an S-Corp election right now through June 13th, that means you've got 24 hours. Collective can save you thousands of dollars in taxes in 2023 because they're able to backdate your S-Corp election to January 1st. So take advantage of this right now. Go to Collective.com. That is Collective.com. Could even help with your personal taxes as well. Collective.com. Coming up today in the Overtime, we continue our Twitter poll series. What's your one-word reaction to these presidential candidates? Today, we'll discuss Chris Christie throwing his hat in the ring. What's your one-word reaction to Chris Christie 2024? We will have those results finalized momentarily, and then we will share them with you and discuss in the Overtime today at blazetv.com/Deace. Again, that's blazetv.com/Deace. If you're not yet a Blaze TV subscriber, you can go there and become one now so you can watch it there later today. It's just $10 a month to get all of our exclusive content. Censorship-free at blazetv.com/Deace. All right, let's deal with a couple of issues that Aaron raises in his montage, because the bulk of the show after this segment is going to be spent talking about the Trump indictment and where this thing indictment 2, and where this thing goes from here. A couple of issues that I want to look at from a biblical worldview standpoint. Well, there's three actually. Aaron explained it perfectly. In general, men do not have the daily needs that woman pretending to be a man is articulating. We, for example, the three of us have worked together for, what is it now, going on 8 years. And out of those 8 years, it's probably 46 weeks out of the year we're working together for 8 years. Mm-hmm. We have grown pretty close over the last 8 years, right?
Absolutely.
I don't remember when your birthday is. I have no clue what your middle name is. I know you've told me before. You'd have to tell me again. Are you bothered by that?
In no way, shape, or form.
Do you care?
I do not.
Why don't you think you care?
Because I don't care.
Yeah, because you weren't made to care. That's not the way you were made. If I came in tomorrow, let's say I knew your middle name and your birthday and all of your kids' middle names and all their birthdays too, I never missed one. But I came in tomorrow and said, you know what, guys, I'm rethinking the biblical worldview prime directive of the show. Hear me out. What would your reaction to that be?
I'm probably quitting.
Yeah. Why? Because you care about that.
Yeah.
Because you were made to care about that. That's the way you're designed, right? Do women have any level of relationship with each other at all that they don't know these kinds of details that men can have relationships for years and not know?
They are far, far, far more likely to know them, yes.
Why is that? Because that's the way that they were made. Do not be deceived. What this woman is finding out is that there is a creator. We were each designed in certain ways. We were each designed in certain ways individually, but also collectively and corporately as men and women, that there are only two kinds of people, men and women. You know, Facebook claims there are 57 genders, and yet when you go to get gender reassignment surgery, you're only given two options, which two would be, what's a word for only two options? What's a word for, is that binary? Binary would be that word? Yeah, indeed. what this woman has found out is that they were a woman, they were made a woman, and therefore she has the needs of one. It is not natural for men to. Doesn't mean there aren't situations we go through certain moments in our lives where we definitely need to get that real with one another to get a brother out of a pit, right? But those are extraordinary moments. Those just aren't part of the daily interaction of what it means. I know far more about your sports allegiances than I do your personal life. Now, if you came to me and said, hey, I'm having some real issues, then I would know. But it would take something like you doing that for me to know and frankly to care, or for you even to want to discuss them with me, right? Mm-hmm. You know why? Because we're men. That's why. That's how we were made. If you go back to the beginning of time, before we all had the luxury of sitting around and just having emotional feedback loops known as social media fed into our bloodstreams and our psyches constantly, I have to go out and fight death-defying creatures to feed you. Are the odds that I will be successful in such endeavor higher or lower if we're just sitting around here contemplating the depths of our emotions constantly?
Lower.
Much lower. And therefore, if the odds of me being successful in the pursuit to feed you go lower, your odds of living, they go higher or lower? Much lower, accordingly. Yes. These are basic things we knew for thousands of years. As a species. Even without divine revelation, we knew them because this law is written on our hearts. We knew this stuff.
And we had gratitude for them because they showed us the face of God.
Which is why even pagan cultures had some form of honor or things of that nature, because again, the law is written on their hearts too. I think it was Lewis who once made the observation that the fact that almost every moral system in the world ever has had some carryover of moral code with one another is indicative of the fact we all come from one singular creator. Now, we believe we've evolved beyond this. We believe that we have transcended this. And the reason why we are transing everything is because we have lost our view of the transcendent. And so we think we now transcend. We don't. And that's what this woman is finding out. She is a woman. She has these needs because that's the way she was made. She was fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God. Each of us are, male and female. The Bible was the first religious tome in human history to say, men and women were made in the image of God. And now she is suffering because of the demonic lie that she fell for. And that's a good reminder as we are battling this to remember we're not battling people ultimately. Which brings us to the polling from Gallup on the trainee madness issue. It has plummeted regardless of party affiliation in just 2 years. There's a lesson here, though, to learn. One is to be encouraged by this data. Understand that there is no number. I think the number could have been 99-1. And I don't think Democratic Party leadership would retreat on this nationally one iota.
You are correct.
Because the party is a demonic construct. So, again, the idea that evil just stops itself, and if you just vote harder, that's if they're counting votes these days, if you just vote harder, it organically goes away, is not true. Someone wrote to me today, well, don't we need to change more of the culture? No. The implication is if you change more of the culture, then this stuff will just organically happen. If you change more of the culture, this stuff will diminish as a result of that equation. But what's the magic number? See, we can GOP ourselves. Like for years we were told by Republicans, well, we don't have 60 people in the House. Well, we don't have 7 Supreme Court justices. Well, we don't have a 40-seat majority. So what was the magic number of times we could give them W's in power They never told us that. You ever notice that? It was always a sliding scale. We can do that too. Like, what's the amount? Do we go to influence.com and it says there's a table we all agree upon, and when you reach this level of influence, things just will happen effectively as a result of achieving that, unlocking that user level of influence. Do we know what that is? No. Here's what I do know. If you have the Holy Spirit and you have the user influence times infinity, you have cosmic power. Act on it. If you can post on a social media feed about this madness, if you can walk to a school board meeting, you have power. Use it. Power is where power goes. Sitting around and waiting for an appropriate number that now we can just go vote passively for people and they will act on it without us watching and knowing it. This country will be on the ash heap of history before we reach that threshold. Which brings me to lesson 2. Learn from how we lost the gay marriage fight. We won 31 elections in a row. We had all the polling momentum on our side. What happened? The courts did. The Supreme Court did. Anthony Kennedy did. And what you have seen since the Supreme Court opinion, first with Windsor and then with Obergefell, is you've seen the numbers completely reverse now from opposing to in favor. Basically, the same percentage of people who 20 or 10 years ago or 15 years ago were opposed to gay marriage are now in favor of it. They've done a complete 180 because of the power of the courts in imposing this. And that's going to make, therefore, winning the next election. And then are we going to nominate Kavanaugh justices or are we going to nominate Clarence Thomas justices? That's going to be, even if you do manage to win, those are going to, that's a key answer to this thing. That's ultimately how we lost gay marriage. We lost it at the Supreme Court. And then once it became the, quote, law of the land, a lot of people then, don't want to defy the law unless it's the law of God. And then lots of people would like to defy it and define it as well. So now is the time to act. We have the wind at our sails. People are increasingly repulsed by this. The more of it that they see. Which brings me to what happened at the White House over the weekend. I want to make sure we all understand what occurred there. All governments, from the beginning until the end of time, are a theocracy. All of them are. We are only debating the method of ocracy and whom is the theo. Those are the only debates. A national religion was declared and genuflected to on the lawn of the White House. Nothing short of that is what occurred. We went from Washington and Lincoln writing Thanksgiving proclamations, urging the people to seek repentance and prayer, to the exact same thing. That's what the Biden administration did. Just to a different God, to a different religion. That is what occurred there. The reason that flag is flying next to the American flag is because it is the national flag.
The American flag is flying next to the Progress Pride flag.
Correct. It's like that two-seater motorcycle that Adam West Batman used to ride with Robin. The American flag is Burt Ward, man. It's the side saddle. It's the side piece. That flag is the main flag. That is the country in which you now live. And we have no chance of reversing that without acknowledging it for what it truly is. Religious devotion, religious worship, religious affirmation from the state. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, and yes, we desperately need a parallel economy in America. It's not going to happen overnight, though. Thankfully, one place where it already has is with a product all of us have to use in this day and age in a modern functioning society, a mobile phone. Make the switch today to our friends over at Patriot Mobile because they are America's only American mobile phone company with an outstanding customer service team. For example, if you're a member of Patriot Mobile, anytime you need to switch networks to any of the 3 major networks out there because you moved to a different part of the city, state, another state, or city, they can help you with that for free anytime at all that you need it with Patriot Mobile. They'll help you make the switch with all your devices, all your accounts. I thought it was going to be a hassle too. They made it fairly seamless. You won't believe how simple they can make it for you. And if you're a veteran or first responder, let them know when you make the switch. They'll have extra thank yous as a way of saying thank you for your service. For the rest of us, you can get a free activation today with the offer code STEVE, my first name, Steve, at patriotmobile.com/Steve. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve, or call them at 878-PATRIOT. That's 878-PATRIOT. Let's welcome in our good friend Bob Vander Plaats here inside the studios, inside the state of Iowa, where his opinion obviously carries a lot of weight with the Iowa caucus is now fully underway. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Doing really well.
All right, so Bob, I'm not even sure what polling numbers you can even discuss anymore. In the 2020 presidential election, mainstream media polling was terrible. It was way off by way outside of its margin for error. Some major polls, New York Times, CNN, were off by 8 points or more. Okay. Now in 2022, though, mainstream media polling was actually pretty accurate. The Real Clear Politics polling average pretty much nailed the final margin for the GOP on the national congressional ballot. The mainstream media polling showed that it was still going to be a battle to win independence, and a lot of us, myself included, thought that would not be the case. Turns out it was right about that too. So I'm not sure right now who to look at. So I decided, what would the Bible tell me to do? Well, there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel, right? Well, that was a mistake.
Said counselors, not pollsters.
Not the Bible, but the pollsters. Because I went and looked at 3 major mainstream media polls. And to some degree, 3 of them told me different things. And now why are we analyzing Trump's indictment politically? Because this is primarily a political situation.
If it's a political witch hunt, you better measure it politically.
All right, so here's the CBS poll. All right. Now, in fairness, the CBS poll is just a poll of Republicans, okay? 61% said that Trump's indictment won't change their views. 76% say it is politically motivated. 80% said Trump should be able to run for president even if convicted over the mishandling of classified documents. Okay. Then we have the ABC post-Trump indictment poll. This is more of the general public. 61% said the charges are serious, including 38% of Republicans in this poll. By a margin of 48 to 35, Americans believe Trump should be charged. Trump's approval is at 31%. And then I looked at the NBC poll as well. And I just looked at, and so I just got confused and said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look at what these polls tell me about what independents say. Because it's going to be pretty clear at this point that
Republicans are staying home,
and Democrats
are staying home.
Yeah, no one's moving.
Right.
And the reality is, since 2016, when Trump won the election and won independence, the Republicans have lost independence in the next 3 elections. They lost them by double digits in 2018 and 2020. They made up a lot of ground in 2022, but still lost them by a few points. And ultimately, that's why we didn't see the red wave that we were anticipating. So what do independents think? Here's what I came up with in these polls. All right. Independents think Trump should have been charged by a margin of 45 to 33, so plus 12. 63% believe these charges are, quote, serious. 63% also don't believe Trump should be allowed to serve as president if convicted, quote, of a serious crime. Independents, by the way, are the largest voting bloc in the country. They have been the largest voting bloc since 2009. And we are approaching the all-time record high amount of people identifying as independents in the Gallup poll. Right now, the current margin is 42%, which is plus 10 over any party identification nationwide. All right. So just looking at those numbers, do you believe them? And depending on whether you believe them or not, what's your reaction?
Well, the comment I made to several people in the national media, they're texting me, asking me, what do you think of these indictments? What's it going to do to Trump? And on the Republican side, what I said, and this doesn't reflect any of your polling, but I said, if you are all in for Trump to be our 2024 nominee, because we know there's a certain core that's all in for Trump, you're going to be more all in for Trump. Why? Because you're taking this personally. They're going after the president. They're going after you. So you're going to take this personally. Said, however, if you're in the camp of, I'm looking for an alternative to Trump, I want to consider Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, whoever it is, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, whoever it is, this is going to make you more emboldened to say, I want to select an alternative to Trump. What I've seen in these polls, Steve, especially with the candidates, is that the polls are terrible, they're worthless, they're useless unless I'm in the lead. Mm-hmm. And then I quote the polls. Mm-hmm. If I'm in the lead, then I quote the polls. But if I'm behind, then I don't quote the polls. Or I say that they're bad, misleading. I think the indication that you brought up, and I saw it in your Twitter feed, about the independents, I think that's probably as spot on as you can get. What are the independents thinking? What are the ones that, quite frankly, don't have a dog in the hunt, so to speak? What do they think of this? And if 63% of them are saying this is serious, that's a real issue. That moves into those looking for an alternative. Trump is saying, I don't believe the president can win again. If I want him to win again, I'm not so sure he can win again. So therefore, you need to look for an alternative. So the polls, I don't know how this thing's going to shake out. And there's a lot of questions with a lot of our institutions today. I would say for the Department of Justice, they better dot their I's and cross their T's and be above and beyond reproach on this one, because this is going to put the whole nation in a fragile state.
So let's talk about independents, because I think, there's a misperception about whom independents are. I'm a registered independent. I have largely...
Nobody had that as the poster child for independence. Steve Deace,
and I think that's an important point.
Exactly.
I except for limited windows when I had to register Republican in order to take part in the Iowa caucuses. Sure. I have been a registered independent for the majority of time since TARP in 2008. Mm-hmm. That was kind of my last straw that was the last gasp of my yellow dog Republicanism.
So
TARP.
The Maverick didn't do it for you?
Did not do it for me. All right, so I have, and I have not been, because we have not had a contested Iowa caucus. And except for primary day, where I will go in and change that day and then the next day change, I have been, except for primary day for like a 48-hour cycle, I have been a registered independent since 2015 or 16. Mm-hmm. So that's going on 7 years now. I think the old kind of Rush Limbaugh era panning of moderates as these squishy, or independents as these squishy moderates, is not accurate. I think that is still well, let me rephrase. I don't think it's entirely accurate. I do think there is a significant ratio of people who call themselves independents who are just kind of squishy moderates. But I think increasingly, and there was a big Pew survey that was done of this about 10 years ago, increasingly people that are calling themselves moderates are actually people of very strong ideological conviction. They just don't think either party is truly serious about pursuing their ideological convictions anymore, and they've given up on the process.
And you saw that in particular, in 2016. Mm-hmm. When the Democrats nominated Hillary Clinton, there's a lot of Democrats saying, listen, she doesn't represent who I am. Mm-hmm. And when the Republicans nominated Donald Trump, there's a lot of Republicans saying, listen, he does not represent who I am. And that's where you started to see some independence.
Well, you look at a rural state like Iowa. I've mentioned this before. There were about 30 counties in Iowa that voted for Obama either once or twice, that voted for Trump twice. And those are a lot of places that we could not flip red in the past. A lot of those are going to be independent voters who thought that, and a lot of times they will invest in somebody they think is inspirational and can deliver, like an Obama, or they think is disrupting and can deliver, like a Trump, because they've largely given up on the conventional political system. Okay. And it's very clear. Independents have made this very clear in the last few elections. They don't care about the soap opera, the stuff that drives a lot of the content that platforms like us produce for people like you, that you want. They don't care about. They don't care about melodrama. They don't care about soap operas. They just don't care about any of that. You can argue with it. You can, run from it. Sooner or later, destiny arrives nevertheless. You can't change it. So there's two options that you have here. you can either change independents' minds into making them think that in this case they should make an exception and it's serious, and that's an option. I would imagine Ron DeSantis has done all kinds of things in Florida that we like now that if you would have pulled them the minute he talked about them, like going after Disney, weren't immediately popular with independents. Okay, but then once they actually did those things.
And laid out why we're going after Disney.
Once those things were done, and they didn't seem to be as radical or crazy now, and effectively as they were perceptively, the proof was in the pudding on election day. So you can change minds, but that's going to take more of an effort than memes. You're going to have a serious conversation, and to that end, some of the president's attorneys did make the rounds going around the major programs on Sunday, which I thought was good to have those conversations. So those are your two options. You're running into a brick wall here, and the reality is these people don't care. They just instinctively don't care whether Trump is being treated unfairly or not. They don't care about witch hunts. They don't care. So you got to either make them care, and you'll have to communicate, I think, to them differently, Bob, than you have in the past, and in different ways than you communicate to the slappies that are already for you, or you're just going to run into, if you nominate him, if you don't make them care, you're going to run, if you nominate him, you'll run into the same brick wall you've ran into for the last 3 elections. And these kinds of political persecutions will only amplify if you give these people that are doing them even more power to continue them.
And the proof of caring and the proof of the narrative is basically the responsibility of the DOJ. You better prove your case and prove your case well. And if you're Donald Trump, it's more than a truth post of saying this is a political witch hunt. We've all heard that before. It's more than showing up at a rally saying, this is the biggest witch hunt in history.
The slappies agree with you already.
It's got to be done with that. Show them why this isn't. I mean, give them real content. And I think having spokespeople on the Sunday shows is a good thing. Now, you also have others who have been aligned with Trump saying, this is a real problem for him. So I think it's going to be on the Trump narrative, Trump team, Trump campaign, whatever it is, to say this is why I'm innocent. And he's got to be able to prove it. And I think it's more than calling your people to show up in Miami to protest this thing. Matter of fact, that could also be seen by independents as very reckless to be doing that as well.
So there are 4 criminal cases going after Donald Trump. And then we just had a civil case. But there are 4 criminal cases. There's the 34 felony count indictment in Manhattan. He will be found guilty there. I don't care what the evidence is. Here's my evidence. 12% of Manhattan voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, that was done the day it was filed.
So that trial is in March. He'll be found guilty of something there, some felony he'll be found guilty of. There is this effort, which is the first DOJ indictment. Now, this is going to take place in Miami because that's where Mar-a-Lago is located there, and that's where the documents were supposedly wrongfully handled. All right, so there's this case. There is a second DOJ case that is occurring right now in Washington, D.C., involving January 6th. He will be found guilty there. I mean, there are still hundreds of Trump supporters who committed no violent acts on January 6th who have been indefinitely detained all this time.
Yeah, there's no doubt he's guilty. That he's going to be proven or not proven. He's going to be cast guilty.
He's going to be found guilty of being Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., in front of a D.C. jury. And then there's the 4th case in Georgia. This is where they had the crazy jury foreman who said she just voted to indict Trump because she wanted to be able to have to swear him in or something. Okay, that's the Fulton County, another partisan hack case. They'll find him probably guilty of something. Okay, I bring this all up to say, I think the odds are at least 90% that on Election Day 2024, Donald Trump is a convicted felon, maybe multi-convicted felon, and or facing incarceration or some form of house arrest. Your thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, I think you're right. And everybody needs to take that into calculation. Fair or unfair, you need to take that into calculation. Because the fact is, if this keeps driving those independent numbers that you just laid out, and that 63% goes to 72%.
No, it could go the other way.
Yeah, it could
this could get dragged out and people see more of it, like on the trans issue, and suddenly independents maybe go the other way and say, all right, come on.
If the polling number goes the other way of saying, listen, this is a witch hunt. This guy can't do anything. He's to be found guilty. You're right. That could help him out. But if it goes the other trend line of saying, listen, this guy he's played too loose with the line. We can't afford to have him in there again. That becomes a real issue as well.
The issue, the challenge here, and there is Gallup poll. We highlighted it earlier. the trainee madness, particularly in the sports world, has plummeted across the board, even among Democrats, in just the last 2 years. The thing, though, is our daughters. If we were polling our daughters, if we were polling favorables, who would be higher, our daughters or Donald Trump?
Our daughters.
Our daughters would
yes.
be. All right. It is easier, especially on the fly, to make our daughters a sympathetic victim. Okay. On the fly, you've got to suddenly turn Donald Trump, whom is still sitting at a 30% net favorable. You've still got to, on the fly, you have to turn him into a sympathetic figure. I'm not saying it cannot be done. I'm just saying it's a more difficult challenge than, putting Ainsley Erzin up as we did in the state of Iowa. All right.
And part of the issue Trump has of being turned into a sympathetic victim is he has taken shots at a lot of people. And so when you take a lot of shots at a lot of people, for whatever the case, for the reason it is, it's hard now to say, hey, have sympathy on me. I'm now the victim. And so where Ainsley Erzin, she's an innocent high school kid, now freshman in college, going to be a sophomore in college. It's easy to say you're a sympathetic victim. Somebody like Trump, who has played this game since he was a businessman in New York, trying to get that group to be you're a sympathetic victim is a tough task.
Before we let you go, I got about a minute. Did you hear anything over the weekend that you thought was interesting about this? Or did you just like everybody's got to be in their silos? What's the point?
Quite frankly, I thought it was unusually quiet for a former president to have this level of indictment.
I expected. I have not seen nearly the blowback about this.
Yeah.
I did the issue in Manhattan.
Me, it was either a thing people are saying, listen, I don't know what all this indictment stuff is about. We have to let it play out. So I'm just going to be quiet right now. I'm going to worry about the heat and the nuggets or whatever it is that you happen to be worried about right now. But unusually quiet, even amongst our base, very, very quiet on this, which basically probably goes into Donald Trump's narrative. It just continues. They just keep coming after me. That might actually help him out, unless they have, quote unquote, the smoking gun to say, here's your problem.
What would be the smoking gun? See, I don't believe there's any smoking gun. If they had it, they could produce that would move people one way or the other. That's why I just looked at what independents thought, because I think that's the only persuadable group.
And it even harkens back to Steve. I mean,
30 seconds.
We laughed about it at the time, but in Sioux Center, Iowa, when he said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
And they'd still vote for it. That's kind of where you're at today. You have a core that's still going to vote regardless, and you're going to have a core that's never going to vote for him regardless. And then you got those in the middle saying, we need somebody else.
Hour 2 is next. And greetings, back with Hour 2. Live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. And all of you can let us know, hopefully, though not all at once, what you think about what we think by emailing the show. Steve at stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also find me on Truth Social at Real Steve Deace there. You can also find, we hope to find anyway, your 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. You can hit subscribe or follow if you're an iTunes listener. And we thank each and every one of you that have done those things for us and helped to boost the show accordingly. Thank you for making the sufficient offering to the algorithmic gods who rule over us these days. Also, you can find an option for your kid to not get programmed by the total state via our friends over at Freedom Project Academy. They have perfected online learning, offering live, on-demand homeschool courses K through 12, built on Judeo-Christian values and a classical curriculum. Now, that's a buzzword we're using a lot now. And on the right, what's classical curriculum mean? Well, to put it simply, it means that you are taught how to think, not what to think. So critical thinking, we're bringing that back. Also, you're taught mastery of subject matter that actually matters, not how to be subjected so that you can be mastered by the government later. All right. So if this is something you want to invest in or take a look at, you should. Our own son Noah was in it for a couple of years. I know the people who helped to found the school as well. We fought together back in the day against Common Core. Save 10% on tuition, or if you want to just start with a free information packet, you can do that as well. When you go to freedom4school.com, that's freedom4, F-O-R, freedom4school.com. Again, check it out. You won't regret it. freedom4school.com. All right, we're going to spend the rest of the show, we started that conversation looking at the polling data. Before we move on to the rest, did you guys want to comment on the polling data conversation that we just had with Bob Vander Plaats at all, or do you want to let that go and move on?
I think we can mostly let it go. We can't even discuss. It's the most theoretical thing ever.
Yes.
Because nobody can imagine a situation. Nobody on either side can imagine a situation where Donald Trump is suddenly not Donald Trump anymore, and that's what you're asking him to be.
You mean to create himself as a more sympathetic figure?
A different narrative, and an apology, not just going release the Kraken. I mean, any number of things that I refuse to believe will ever happen because he's never given us a reason to believe that they will.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I would just say the polls right now, I don't care which one of them to me are like the Ukraine conflict. I don't.
What's true?
What's true? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Schrodinger's cat as well. It's like, well, I can see scenarios where the cat is dead. I can see scenarios where the cat is alive. I just don't know.
If you were to ask me, and I would imagine this is a question I will get in my inbox, so let me try to answer it now. If you were to ask me, Steve, what would you suggest? You said, hey, then, we can sit here. We all hear the Johnny Cash. I hear the train a-coming. It's rolling around the bend. Like, we know it's coming. We've been through this 3 elections in a row with independents that have let us down. 3 in a row. So, I don't, as things are currently constructed, there is no scenario, I believe, that they will now just suddenly decide, okay, this is BS, we have to stop this. So then, if I told you you have the option of changing their minds, what would that look like? A lot of times people that are independents think that the melodrama of politics is largely just the two parties feeding their lemming supporters that don't critically think a narrative that largely is not true. And frankly, there is certainly some truth in that. Okay. So you have to, I think if you want to make the case, if you want to change independents and what they're thinking, and I would say this to any of my colleagues who are in our industry who are tuned in right now, any of our friends, anybody that knows Trump, if you know them, and what you would say, what you wouldn't, doesn't mean my advice I'm about to give is right. Okay? But it's the best advice that I can give. Take it or leave it. And it's free, so that's probably what it's worth. You're going to have to convince them that this is getting in the way of the stuff they actually want government to do for them. Because the reason independents don't like Trump is they have come to the conclusion that he gets in the way of government doing the things that they want government to do for them. And if they're a left-leaning independent, that would be different than a right-leaning independent. Okay? But they view, and this is when you've heard me say before, I can't vote Jim Acosta out of CNN. I can't do that. So if I'm tired of the drama, if I'm tired of the urination matches and everything else that gets all the clicks on the right, but everybody else outside of the right can't stand. The only way I get to weigh in if you're an independent who hates this stuff is on election day. And is Jim Acosta on the ballot?
No.
But Donald Trump is either literally or figuratively, right? Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is on the ballot with a name when Carrie Lake's on the ballot. Or Donald Trump himself is on the ballot. And so you weigh in that way. Just, I don't care, make it go away, I'm tired of it. Just do your damn jobs. This is high school, I don't care. This guy's ridiculous. You have to show them. And I'm going to tell you right now, Trump won't make it easy with his behavior. That's what you were just addressing. Mm-hmm. He won't make it easy. So you're going to have to, in my view, show them a Trump-less world. You have to show this. You have to put the system on trial by itself. That doesn't matter what the defendant's name is. And that's very hard on the right because we all want to slap Trump's name on everything because apparently it's like instant millions, okay, if you do that. But I just don't. I think that's, first of all, in my line of work, we have to make a decision. Do we want to win this war in the next election or cash checks in the immediate? because I think those things are frankly at odds with each other. What will cash checks right now is we all just ignore the Johnny Cash song playing in the background. We just ignore it. Just print Winch Hut as many times as we can, BS as many times as we can, Banana Republic, I think even I dropped it earlier, right? Say all that stuff as many times as we can. Yeah, ratios go up, and the iTunes rankings go up, and the checks cash, and we're sitting here on January 21st, 2025, and all of a sudden we're like, new fatwa just dropped. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, now you're like, can I even be on iTunes? Can I, right? You're Michael Knowles getting suspended from YouTube for a week. Welcome to the party, pal. We got suspended for 6 months once. Okay. I mean, I think we have to make that decision first and foremost. Because I think what it will take, and again, I could be wrong. I've been wrong before, plenty of times. But I think if independents were going to be moved by the persecution of Donald Trump, they would have been moved by now, more than likely.
I totally agree.
So therefore, you have to move them. And I think what will move them is you have to take this beyond Donald Trump. Almost don't even share Truth Social posts, don't even his clips, don't share any of that stuff. That stuff's all a loss leader to them. They don't like him. And you have to point out that the Biden regime is going after someone for mishandling documents while we are on the verge of breakdowns on multiple levels of society. That the Biden regime is waging a political persecution in not that they're being unfair to Trump, not that they're targeting their future opponent. They don't care. I don't think independents care about that. They're doing this instead of doing what you want government to do for you. Instead of securing your border. Whatever your issue is, if you're a more left-wing independent. Making healthcare more affordable, whatever it is. But this is their priority. It's not you. That's my best advice. I think anything short of that, dig in your heels. The emancipation will get 4 more years.
See, that most people are going to think, though, and a lot of people on the right think that this is just more of the same. Two impeachments, all of that stuff. They just think it's all of a piece. Where I'm of a different mindset. I have no problem believing, and I've heard from multiple or read from multiple people I respect, that in this latest series of indictments, at the very least, so brazenly sloppy and careless that he's guilty of something. But as I've said, even with that said, and me supporting DeSantis now, I will still never forget. And not supporting Donald Trump the first time, as none of us on this show did, I will still never forget what they tried to do just because they hate that man, and by extension, all of us, with those multiple impeachments, lying about Russia, lying about Ukraine, unleashing this stupid virus on us, quite frankly. See, I'll never forget. That's actually the antidote for whereas many people, that's like, he's just always in the middle of a mess. No, those people made Donald Trump the middle of a mess because his presidency was successful for going on 3 years. And now, as much as he's guilty of here, I'll just never forget. I'll defend him just like we defended Kavanaugh, unless something new comes along that I haven't seen. But that's the thing.
Donald Trump's done a hell of a lot for us, more for us than Brett Kavanaugh has. But yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
But most people see like, oh, the guy's just, there's something about him that's always dirty. They went DEFCON on him and his presidency, by extension us, in ways that included unleashing viruses on us. And most people just don't see that. And that's the real problem.
So I was going to ask you guys whether you wanted to have the legal conversation or the political conversation first. But since we started having the political conversation, let's go ahead and have that one first. Okay. So I said I was going to take some time over the weekend. We talked about it on Thursday, I think it was, right? I was going to take some time over the weekend, contemplate this, and kind of gather my thoughts. Let me lay some of those out for you. And I posted these originally on Twitter over the weekend. So here's what I want to do here for the next few minutes, and it's going to fall on some deaf ears when you post this stuff on Twitter, where there are too many people that are emotionally or financially invested in an outcome, one way or the other, where Trump is concerned. So they can't or they won't be able to have an adult conversation. But I am confident within this audience, if you're a part of it, you're here at least somewhat for some form of an adult conversation. So let us have one. Okay? Looking at the DOJ case, it looks like it is only about the Mar-a-Lago raid and the classified documents allegedly found there. Hence Trump being indicted in Miami. However, that jury pool won't be as biased against him as the one in Manhattan. Trump received about 46% of the vote in Miami-Dade County in 2020. And remember, Ron DeSantis won Miami-Dade County last November. Okay. And yes, in this era of political persecution, to me, evidence doesn't matter. That's why I've not read the indictment. And I'm usually the guy that reads all this stuff. Why? Because I don't think evidence matters nearly as much as the political loyalties of the prospective jury pool and the judge. That's why I think Trump is toast in Manhattan. He got only 12% of the 2020 vote there. So I think he's going to be convicted of felonies there. But in Miami, he has a much better chance at a fair trial. Now, on a sliding scale, of course, because he's still Donald Trump. However, since this case seems isolated to only the documents issue, that means another Department of Justice indictment pertaining to January 6th likely looms later. When I say likely, I mean like likely that monkeys won't fly out of my butt. Likely. Okay? Like I can't say it for sure. You know, all my days, I've not lived all my days yet. Okay? But odds are pretty high that that's not going to occur. Okay? And in that indictment, Trump is going to be subjected to the same D.C. Star Chamber that has incarcerated hundreds of his supporters for non-violent protest. You know, the people Republicans in D.C. who are now pretending to be outraged by Trump's treatment have totally ignored. I think of Nancy Mace, for example. Nancy Mace admitted, Nancy Mace was tweeting pride events, the South Carolina congressman at this time last year. All right. She admitted during congressional testimony she was vaccine injured. Then she did nothing.
Forgot about that.
She admitted she was vaccine injured and then did nothing. But dude, she's going to the mattresses for Donald Trump right now because she's realized, why don't I just play the Lee Stefanik game? Just screw the Republican base on issues they care about. And it's provided I kvetch hard on Trump, you guys just overlook the fact I'll betray you on every meaningful issue. So she's going to the mattresses for Donald Trump's unfair persecution at the moment when she's had nothing to say about the hundreds of Trump supporters themselves who have been indefinitely detained now for going on more than 2 years. Which, to me, I just as an aside, and I know this is not a popular question to ask, but I cannot help myself. At what point will we care as much about what has unfairly happened to Trump supporters as we do Trump himself? I mean, what kind of a populist movement cares only for fearless leader while the true believers get left behind? This is why I've never felt quite at home with this movement. Because, to me, that's a branding. That's not a movement. I mean, there's hundreds of Trump supporters right now and have been for the last 2 years indefinitely detained in D.C. gulags who didn't commit any violent acts, aren't even alleged to have committed violent acts. And some very prominent people who are claiming to be outraged now have had nothing to say for or about them for the last 2 years. That bothers me. Let's continue. Now let's go back to the Miami indictment. It is so brazenly partisan and hacktastic. Why do I say that? Because of the selective prosecution angle. Steve, without reading the indictment, how can you make that case? Because of the selective prosecution angle. We'll get to more of that here when we get to the legal analysis. To me, I think you can only describe this as late Republican nonsense. All decorum, stuff that maybe got talked about in smoke-filled rooms or anonymous posts on message boards about what you'd like to do to your political opponents, but in reality world, you knew you couldn't possibly get away with it, so it never happened. That's the stuff that's happening right now. If you want to know why Mother Jones and Vox and these sites are going out of business, it's because the New York Times is just what they were. It's reality now. We don't need a fringe left. There is no fringe left. There's just the mainstream left now. All right? And never forget, we are not a nation of laws and never have been. We are a nation of political will, and we always will be. To that end, the political persecutions are going to continue until they are stopped. They must be stopped. Far as I can tell, the only way that I know for sure that you can stop them is to win the 2024 election. Otherwise, they will continue and escalate all the more. Now, there are other ways. For example, Republicans in Congress that control the House could just say, we're not allocating another dime of tax dollars until this all stops. Think they're going to do that, though? No. We just had a budget fight. It was totally fake, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, to quote Trump, it is what it is. So, ironically, him not engaging in that budget fight and being dismissive of it actually helped Republicans to set aside maybe the biggest piece of leverage they had to stop the persecution of Donald Trump himself, the power of the purse. But it is what it is. So they just gave away the budget fight for the entirety of the rest of the Biden presidency. They just handed it over. So they don't have that leverage anymore. It would take some extraordinary means for them now to say we're not allocating any more money after the deal they just cut. So about the only thing I can think of now that could make this stop is Republicans winning the 2024 election. But that is 592 days of persecutions that could go on before a Republican, by any name, would be eligible to take the oath of office. And that means if Democrats win, I think you'll see the persecutions escalate all the more. Because the social compact in America is, and perhaps irrevocably so, broken. Thus, elections now are only about acquiring power. Elections are only about acquiring power. Elections are only about acquiring power. Let me say that again. Elections are only about acquiring power. That's all they're about now. Which brings us to some political realities, a reality that's going to be difficult to hear for those who are compensated to direct us to a particular outcome or are emotionally invested in that same particular outcome. However, while a platform like Twitter is growing, where I originally posted this, and under its current leadership, I'm all for that, it still isn't America. The talking points and narratives that we exchange on a place like Twitter, or a lot of our right-of-center blogospheres, aren't relevant to people in places outside of our blogospheres, like Iowa, for example. In those places, the number one issue for those that aren't regime-compliant, want-to-be Marxist, is winning the 2024 election. Who can win? So to that end, I think we need to get real here, especially after some of the polling data I cited with you last hour. I just don't believe, barring a very successful effort to convince independents that it's more than a political persecution of Donald Trump, whom they don't like. And they've made that very clear in the last few elections. They do not like him. So it's more than that. It's government using Trump as an excuse for why it doesn't do what you want it to do. You need to, barring a successful attempt at doing that, which could happen, that could occur. It's just we're not doing the things now, I believe, that would make that happen. We're feeding our audience the feedback loop of Trump persecution that independents don't care about. Barring that, an incarcerated individual either in a jail cell or house arrest is not winning the presidency, period. I cannot believe I have to say this. But I've said that a lot over the last few years, right? I can't believe I have to say this. So we're going to be saying a lot more of those. I can't believe I have to say this things. If we're being adults, set our meal tickets and our devotion aside and think critically, we have to realize that this is true. If for no other reason, then, man, if you can brazenly steal an election from a sitting president, how much easier is it to concoct the narrative to steal one from a convicted felon? Dude, they'll be counting votes in Pennsylvania till Valentine's Day, okay? Let's continue. Think of all the false narratives that you could justify perpetuating against President Trump. Multiply that by a factor of infinity against felon Trump. There literally isn't a suburban voter in America who voted against Trump twice who will now think otherwise. We all know this. It sucks. Not very profitable to say it, but it is likely true nevertheless. And there are lots of people around this industry bellowing otherwise who, if you put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth upon them and compelled them to say so, they would have to admit what I'm saying is accurate. They know it. For example, show me the suburban voter who's going to say, crap, man. I voted for a dementia patient in 2020 over the guy that pre-COVID gave me literally the best economy so far this century. But now that he's a convicted felon, I'm just totally seeing Trump in a new light. Come on, man. Come on. Democrats know this too. That's why they're doing this. They're doing it for this reason. I don't see any way Trump is not a convicted felon by Election Day 24. Maybe even a multi-convicted felon. All shams, in my opinion, yes, but in the America we have today, it doesn't matter because almost nothing does. One thing that maybe does still matter is winning the election next year by hook or by crook. For if we don't, a lot more of us will be targeted next. The talking point we're using that is true, this is bigger than Trump, if they can do this to him, they'll do it to the rest of us, is true. And we've already seen examples of this. Let's go back to that slide, Aaron. That's exactly why you have to win the next election. We cannot have an emotional protest vote. That's all going to sound great, funny. We gave you the middle finger. Sooner or later, January 21, 2025 arrives. And it's a dementia patient or one of Montel Williams' hoes or Gavin Newsom taking the oath of office. And they will put on the infinity gauntlet and wield that power. So we need to ask ourselves who can win the next election to give us that power instead. Without power, agency, standing, your beliefs are culturally irrelevant. By the end of this decade, there may be more Christians in China than anywhere in the world, but they will largely be underground and culturally irrelevant. Let's continue. That is where this is headed, and where the people doing this to Trump and the January 6thers absolutely want this to go. So we need to see this here with a wide-angle lens. For example, what power do your elected Republicans in D.C. or even your own states have that they can now use? I just gave you an example that Republicans in Congress could use or could have used before the debt ceiling sellout. Because the soonest a GOP president can take over is 592 days from now. And a lot of persecution can happen between now and then. Do those rabidly tweeting, that's why we have to vote Trump at literally everything, have a plan for what we can do for the next 592 days? Have they offered any plan other than voting Trump?
I believe not.
No. Do people who currently hold elected office who are running for president like DeSantis have one? 592 days from now, we will either inaugurate someone who will make these persecutions stop, or we won't. There is no in between. And if we don't inaugurate someone who will make them stop, all of the existential tweeting that we are doing, podcasting that we are doing, blogging that we are doing, profiteering, frankly, that we are doing, is null and void at that point. We are fighting for survival. And therefore, much of America will be null and void. Democrats, sometimes the enemy has you cornered. They either get to jail Trump and he's gone, or they get to oppose a felon Trump and win. It sucks, I know. But it's time to set aside our vanity, anger, paychecks, and see this clearly. We are close to the anniversary of Dunkirk. It was just a couple of weeks ago. What was Dunkirk? What was left of Western civilization with the U.S. not yet in the war was stranded on that beach. Could have been finished right then and there. Churchill could have stomped his feet. I refused to recognize reality. I'll show them, and got annihilated. And we'd all be speaking German right now, and Man in the High Castle would be nonfiction. Sometimes you have to recognize when you don't have the odds, and you have to react strategically and accordingly. The only way out of this, in my view, short of revival, is to win. Anything short of that, and I'm here to warn you today on June 12th, 2023, all the stuff that we're going to say and write and do right now that it will be very profitable to say, write, and do, we will wish we did differently in January of 2025 if we don't accept reality right now. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
There's a couple tricks to this. There's not just the trick of getting to see Donald Trump differently in the way that you just laid out. But then there's the other way. If you put him in there again, and this is one thing that DeSantis is rightly bringing up, if you put him in there again, the only solution is to finally drain the swamp and gut anything. It's an absolute must. And so a lot of people are stuck. Well, even if I can get myself to get past putting Donald Trump back in the White House and past all of the felonies and things like that, for the sake of argument, I can't get past seeing, I don't think he's going to drain the swamp. There's multiple layers of this. That's actually, it's a lot harder for me to see him getting in there and doing what must be done than for me to say, listen, if it's DeSantis at the end of the day and it is what we know now and it's not worse for some reason, I'll vote for him over Biden. But I also I think the odds are low that he'll spend this at this age and with that level of schadenfreude really going to work. I don't see it. I just don't see it. Because Ron DeSantis and what he said about the military, he's absolutely right. At the roots, Donald Trump has different roots.
Aaron, what do you think?
Multiple things, as always, are true. Any law that's applied unevenly or selectively is not much of a law. It is no law at all. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's true. It's also true that even if this entire lawfare, whether it's on January 6th, phony baloney 34 felonies in Manhattan, or what we're talking about here with the classified documents flap, let's just pretend all of that is gone. They fortified an election against him in 2020. Before that, in 2016, he shocked the world by threading a needle through various eyes of needles, threading a thread through various eyes of needles in a path to the presidency that is just not replicatable. What is your plan for 2024? I don't know what it is. I just don't.
All right, we'll come back and look at this from a legal side in a moment. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, and I mentioned post knee scope, we're going to have the wife start off with Relief Factor, and she has begun. And, you know, I don't know that it's all as a result of Relief Factor. I can tell you, though, they are very impressed with her range of motion, her lack of pain, how quickly she is recovering. I think she'll be able to resume Pilates here maybe in a week or two.
Oh, wow.
So they're very pleased with how Amy is recovering from the cleanup that she had with the bone spurs and the torn meniscus about 3 weeks ago. And we started Relief Factor about 10 days ago with her. And so far, we are seeing that why so many people give Relief Factor a shot to deal. Now, hey, Relief Factor wasn't going to help her with the bone spurs and a torn meniscus. Those are clinical issues that required a clinical solution. That's why we waited to start Relief Factor until the clinical phase of what she needed was taken care of. And now, though, we got to get and deal with the inflammation in her body, particularly in her knees, that helps to create situations like that clinically. And that's why Relief Factor was created by doctors who can prescribe drugs, even though it's drug-free itself, because they saw that a lot of the issues they were seeing in their clinic, from a clinical perspective, stemmed from a chronic problem of too much inflammation in the body. And that's what Relief Factor is. It's an all-natural anti-inflammatory. Try it for 3 weeks. Get the 3-week quick start, just $20. See if you don't see a difference in your body's pain level in 3 weeks or less for just $20. Why do they offer it so inexpensively to start? Because about 70% of the people who try it do see positive results and stick around. And so they'll play those odds, call their bluff. Give it a shot, relieffactor.com. Again, head over to relieffactor.com. Once more, that's relieffactor.com. All right, let's look at this indictment legally now. And it's kind of funny. This is supposedly a highbrow criminal proceeding. We have discussed this case for an hour straight. It's just the story for an hour straight on this show, and we are just now getting the legalities.
It's appropriate,
which just goes to show how little that really matters here when the name Donald Trump is said one way or the other. Bill Barr, Trump's attorney general, who, I was never a fan of Bill Barr. I guess you can give him credit for bringing the Russian collusion farce to a head, but that was essentially the totality of Bill Barr's accomplishments as attorney general. He was of no use on virtually any other front, except for speeches and cocky drinks of water and playing the bagpipes. He was on Fox News Sunday yesterday. He said, quote, "If half of what is in there is true, then Trump is toast. It's a very detailed indictment, very, very damning. This idea of presenting Trump as a victim of a witch hunt is ridiculous. Yes, he's been a victim in the past, but this is much different," end quote. I thought this response from our colleague Mark Levin, who himself has a bit of legal expertise, to Bill Barr, I thought his response was fascinating. Mark tweeted out earlier today, "Hey, Bill Barr, did you ever read classified information when you were driven back and forth from the Department of Justice in your house? That's a violation of the Espionage Act," meaning the way that it's being interpreted in this indictment. "When your papers were boxed up at the end of both tenures as AG, did you provide guidance to your staff on what could be removed? Was it in writing? Did you remove unclassified government documents when you departed, including letters on AG stationery? Did you keep a list of what you removed? You're appearing on TV more than Michael Avenatti did because of your hate for Trump, but nobody grills you." And I think a lot of what he says there is important, but especially this last part. I would like to hear Bill Barr's response to everything that Mark just laid out. Wouldn't you like to hear it?
Yeah.
And given the seriousness of the moment as a country, don't you? I think we deserve to hear it. Are we probably going to get to hear it?
Oh, no.
No. Think Bill would be anxious to go on Mark's show and respond to this?
No.
Probably not. And I think that's a shame. Because now we will get to hear this in court. My guess is Trump's attorneys are going to make these points in a court of law when it goes to trial. They're going to say selective prosecution, political persecution. I mean, look at these kinds of examples and, that Mark brought forth. I guess depending on who runs the Department of Justice, all those otherwise benign things that probably have happened in Washington how many times over the years are now suddenly a violation of the Espionage Act. Okay? It's the old Eddie Murphy routine. How we got pulled over one day, and he asked the officer, "Am I speeding?" He said, No, son, you were going the speed limit." "Well, why'd you pull me over?" So the officer looked up at the sky, noticed the sun in the sky, and said, "For being black on a sunny day." Okay? That's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So these are only violations of the Espionage Act if Trump does them. That's going to be the case that his people are going to make in a court of law. And then it'll just be a matter of how politicized the jury is and whether they're willing to hear that or not.
The lie is the point.
The lie is the point, which is why I would love to hear, even if Bill Barr just put out a press release or tweeted out or wrote a column, I'd love to get his reaction to what the points that Mark made there, because I think those are very valid points. Jonathan Turley, who has been a fairly pro-Trump legal scholar on cable news for the last few years, and has, going back to the Clinton years, been a fairly critical thinker on issues. That's why he's been featured on all the networks, even Fox. He's a law professor at George Washington University. He was actually one of those whom testified in defense of Trump at his impeachment. He was talking on Fox News with Trey Gowdy and Brit Hume, and his analysis, I'm just going to read you his quotes. Quote, "The problem is that Trump has to run the table. He's 76 years old, and all the government has to do is stick the landing on one count, and he could have a terminal sentence," meaning given his age, one sentence on one count would be enough, because he goes on to say, "You're talking about crimes that have a 10 or 20-year period of penalty as a maximum, and the evidence here is quite strong." Turley said he believes that once a trial jury hears Trump's defense team, some of the charges will get tossed. But the problem is he faces 37 counts. Quote, "Some of this evidence is coming from his former counsel, and these are very damaging statements that have been made against him. It may be hard to move those. The fact is both things may be true. Yes, the Department of Justice may have been out to get him, but he made it easy. If you look at what is being described in this indictment, when confronted with someone that he felt was trying to get him, he couldn't have made it easier for them to do so." Reaction to that from Jonathan Turley. The last part, forget about. What about his main point? All the DOJ has to do is go 1 for 37 at the free throw line. Just one. And depending on who the judge is, you're looking at a 10 to 20 year sentence for a 76-year-old man.
I think Jonathan Turley, in watching him for like 15 years, he truly is one of those guys that is not for sale. I've disagreed with him.
I've disagreed with him too, but I don't think he's for sale.
But he's not for sale.
I agree. Yeah.
But on this, if he's just simply saying it is how it is, okay. But to me, it actually shows the opposite. If you're bringing 37 and all you get is 1, you're the one who's guilty, not Donald Trump. Because I get it. Yeah, it's a wit, and also this is where we have to. We keep speaking into existence. I wish it would speak into existence. The wake up call that it is. If you're saying, yeah, it's a witch hunt, but he makes it easy. Could we focus on the witch hunt thing for a little while?
That's a great point.
This is what's so frustrating. And again, why I have to defend Donald Trump, having been there myself.
Yes, I was going 75 down the interstate, and they pulled me over. 5 cars were going faster than me, and they let those ones go because they looked at my license plate, and the cop's like, I don't like that guy, so you're the one I'm grabbing. Is that's kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
This is really important. It's way more important to hold this system accountable than it is Donald Trump, even if he was president or is going to be president. Specifically, having been there, I was false charges. I had to fight it, and I ended up winning. I don't think I'd win if that happened to me today, but this is really important. It really was about way more than me. It's about you cannot have this system just making stuff up, and it has a track record of doing it on numerous fronts now. We have to stop this. So even Jonathan Turley, as a guy I respect in all of this, he's been more right than so many others, which doesn't necessarily even mean he's been right most of the time. But when you say things like, yeah, it's a witch hunt, but if he'd only have to be guilty of 1 of 37, like, you're telling me how stupid this all is. And I will never, ever accept, well, I guess I just have to go Team Chaos with this. Never, ever.
All right. Let me share the analysis I teased earlier. Okay, this is from an attorney I know, right-of-center attorney. He has not gone up against the Department of Justice in federal court, but he has argued against the government in federal court numerous times, including at times the Trump administration. All right, on various policies that he thinks they either weren't willing to enforce or should have enforced. So he is absolutely a patriot, but not a simp. And I told this person, hey, give brutal honesty, and we're just going to put this out anonymously so you don't have to worry about any blowback. Brutal honesty. Read the indictment. Tell me what your thoughts are. I'm going to share his thoughts, okay? Trump is not charged here with mishandling classified information or the unauthorized disclosure of classified information. Yet the first 46 paragraphs of the indictment detail just that kind of criminal misconduct. Much is made of this negligent storage of the boxes in places open not just to unauthorized persons working at Mar-a-Lago, but also the general public, like the stage in the ballroom, the bathroom, etc. The indictment also includes excerpts of alleged conversations between Trump and various unauthorized individuals, such as a staffer and a writer, in which Trump not only verbally discloses classified information, but shows classified documents to these individuals. And he puts an exclamation point there saying, that's a serious crime, so why aren't they charging him with it, is his point. Here's what seems so fishy to me. If there really were evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he engaged in this kind of malfeasance, why isn't he charged with it? Willfully disclosing classified information, including sensitive military secrets that jeopardizes national security to unauthorized persons, is a much more serious offense, in my opinion, than what he's actually charged with here. In fact, if any of the individuals to whom Trump disclosed this information were an agent of a foreign state that is an enemy of the U.S., such disclosures could legally amount to treason, in which case they would be punishable by death. Now, I don't see any evidence in the indictment that any of those individuals he disclosed to fits that description, but you see my point of the true stakes that we're supposed to be playing for here. In other words, he's making the case, dude, I'm asking, do you actually take your own allegations seriously enough given what you put in this indictment? Okay.
No, which is why there's 37 of them.
Purposely disclosing classified information is worse than just improperly storing it. Though, in fairness, absent treason, it carries an equal or lesser penalty than some of the charges here, a maximum of 10 years in prison and a hefty fine. That alone would be reason enough to suspect these charges are politically motivated. Coupled that with the timing of the indictment given the coming election cycle and maybe the need to distract from Biden's own legal problems related to Hunter and his issues.
You think?
Okay. With all that being said, though, if any of these allegations are proven true in court, then Trump would be guilty of a crime under the letter of the federal law. Then he goes on to make some of your points, though. But that's a separate question. Now, he's like, hey, you asked me a legal question. All right. And if he is found guilty of these things under the letter of the law, he has committed a crime and they are serious offenses. But then he has some of his own personal thoughts that mirror what you just said, Todd. So there's no point in repeating them because you just said them all. He also told me that he thinks it is possible, and this I found fascinating, too. He thinks it is possible that Trump was not charged with the more serious crimes that they are alleging in the first 46 paragraphs of the indictment, because it would more open the feds up to a selective prosecution wormhole. Because go back to what we just read from Mark Levin pushing back on Bill Barr. We get into Hillary's emails. We get into what's on Hunter's laptop. Mike Pence also was found to have taken classified documents he wasn't supposed to. We found Biden had classified in his Corvette or something, right? Okay. And so he thinks it's possible that they didn't go for the more serious things they allege, so as to not open themselves up to selective prosecution and say, well, if this is really that serious, then how come A, B, C, and D did not get prosecuted at the same time?
Which just reinforces how political this is all the more.
And that's now your turn. Your thoughts on what I just shared with you guys. Aaron, you go.
The legal analysis is complete and total bunk. I don't care what the source is, whether it's somebody who thinks it's serious or whether it's somebody who thinks it's kind of a load of junk. Because of what I said earlier, any law that's applied unevenly or selectively is no law at all. So let's just pretend everything that the DOJ has in their indictment, 37? Mm-hmm. Let's just say that's all true.
34 in New York,
and they have
37 here.
37 smoking guns to prove it's all true. I don't care. I do not care, because it's selective prosecution nonetheless.
Well said.
Let's say nothing is, and this is the side that I'm actually erring on. Do we have any? And I'll tell you why. Do we have any examples of people in our government just making poop up to fit a narrative? Do we have any examples?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
A few examples.
In recent times, no. Nothing's coming to me instantly.
On Friday morning, when I saw that report saying that there was a recording of Trump basically saying, what was it? I've got these things because I had an argument with.
I didn't declassify the documents.
Declassify them.
Millie was wrong, and I kept them to prove to people that he was wrong.
At first, I kind of raised my eyebrows. I'm like, well, maybe there's some legitimacy here. I am fully prepared, and I would urge all of you as well to be fully prepared that every last jot and tittle of this indictment was taken out of context or completely blown out of proportion by the DOJ. Because they don't deserve any benefit of the doubt. They deserve your contempt, actually.
Yes.
So I don't really care what the legal analysis is, to be completely honest, because it doesn't matter. Because of how we led off the show, or led off this hour. Not a nation of laws. Never have been. Political will, always will be. Any law, Mama says, any law that's applied unevenly is no law at all. Mm-hmm. So this is no law at all. And because this is no law at all, your legal analysis doesn't matter.
Man, here.
What a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't... After 2 hours of this, that's my big thought. What a bleeping mess.
Or a banana republic. That's what you just laid out.
I mean, I know they're on completely different fronts, but what we were saying earlier about the tranny stuff and all, it's really all the same mess. The evidence is clear. The restraining hand of Almighty God is no longer here. And now it's just going to be one mess after the other. Until tomorrow, John 3:17.